movie. It's called The 4:30 Movie from Kevin Smith, written and directed by Jersey's Golden Boy. This film does not take place within the View Askew universe. You're not going to see Jay and Silent Bob. You're not going to see, well, you are going to see the Quick Stop, which is kind of cool. Well, basically, it's young Kevin Smith growing up in New Jersey, going to the local theater and buying a ticket to see a movie that is age appropriate, and then sneaking in to see the movie he actually intends to see. The film is shot at the Atlantic Highlands Theater, which is the theater he went to as a child, and he now owns it, and now it's his Smod Castle, and he shot the film there. It is loaded with cameos. The stars in this thing are out of control. Everyone's in this movie, but the draw is the three young stars. It's a trio of friends, three young boys who are journeying into manhood. They're sophomores, juniors in high school. Summer's about over, and the lead character, we'll call him Kevin Smith, calls the girl that he had an earlier flirtation with and says, "Hey, why don't you meet me at the movies?" And to his surprise, she says yes. And I will say, his character, very smooth. Like, it was a great call. He did it well. I was like, I would have said yes. The movie's fantastic. The movies within the movie are a delight. I always love movies within movies. Like, put a movie in a movie, and I'll pay the ticket for admission. I love to see those. I love to see the production value that goes into it. Very much a Flash Gordon type thing that they're watching at one point. Ken Jeong is the tyrannical theater manager who tries to thwart the boys' plans. And my favorite appearance is Sam Richardson, who's an actor I cannot get enough of. He elevates every project he's in. He plays a character named Major Murder, which is very much a Sergeant Slaughter, like larger than life wrestling personality. And they do the Mallrats thing where they run into him outside of this persona. They do the Mallrats Stan Lee thing, and they do it again in this film, and it's affecting. Like, there are parts of the film where you find yourself feeling, but otherwise it's a straight up comedy, which is a risky move, but it pays off, and especially in the hands of Kevin Smith.
By the way, I love the expression "journey into manhood," which sounds like one of those films that was like in the back room of your local video store. It sounds like a title of that. But yeah, Kevin Smith, the last thing of his, I attempted to watch Clerks 3 and couldn't make it all the way through, unfortunately. I like Kevin Smith. I like a lot of his films. But so I'm interested to see this one because it sounds like an 80s movie.
Yeah, it's I watched it with a friend. He said it gave him major Superbad vibes. It's set in 1986, and what's great about the movie is that Kevin Smith can't lean on his toy box. He can't lean on his revolving cast of characters that he's developed through all these years. He has to write a genuine story. He has to present a human aspect, and that's why if you're not a fan of his work, you're going to love this movie. And if you are a fan of his work, you're going to love this movie because it's more soul bearing than a lot of his other work.
Whether you like his films or not, you can never argue that Kevin Smith isn't sincere. If you think about his entire career, like especially the View Askew universe, his entire filmography, apart from like Red State and Tusk, are coming of age movies for emotionally stunted adults. So to actually transfer this to people of the correct age group sounds very intriguing.
Right, and their journey into manhood.
It's like you mentioned the back room at the video store. To me, it sounds more like one of those clinical videos you watch in your sex education class.
Or an indie darling at Sundance 2025. We'll see.
Which often ended up in the back room of the video store.
It's co-written, co-directed, co-produced, and co-starring Delaney Buffett, daughter of the late Jimmy Buffett, and Katie Corwin. And they play characters named, respectively, Delaney and Katie. So right away, there's a lot of authenticity in this picture. They're 30-somethings. Delaney's character is a bit adrift. We meet them when they're teenagers at a sleepover, and the boys are going to play a kissing game, and Katie goes into a bathroom to touch up her lip blush, and she finds Delaney hiding in the shower. and they agree to leave, abscond elsewhere, and their friendship forms. And they guide one another through a lot of important parts of their life. Well, Katie is growing a little faster, has less arrested development than Delaney. She's met a wonderful man. They're getting ready to get married. She knows it's going to break Delaney's heart, so she says, let's go on a girls' trip. I'll break the news there. Everything that can go wrong goes wrong. It's very funny. It's very, again, authentic. And by the end, very touching. Like, I got choked up towards the end of this film. It was a really great story about not just Arrested Development, but the people who pull us through these moments in our lives, the people who see us through, the people who are there the whole time, at the beginning, on the other side. And it was also dedicated to Jimmy Buffett. 5 songs of his are in the soundtrack. Land Shark Beer is featured very prominently in one of the pivotal scenes. Funny, moving. I think we see a lot of potential from these two. So I'm very excited that I was able to watch this, and very excited that it's here at Tribeca.
I'm getting like Sideways vibes.
I would say yes. Sideways meets Bridesmaids.
Okay, is it that Bridesmaids level of humor though, like that wacky
There
over
are
the top stuff?
Yeah, there's some there's strippers and dog poo, and yeah, there's some toilet humor with the heartfelt stuff.
Heartfelt toilet humor. I like it. All right, let's move on to the next one. They're going to put that on the poster. Heartfelt toilet humor.
I interviewed Justin Long about his movie, which he referred to as a fart-warming comedy. So, if that can happen, this can happen.
Sure.
To see Alien Romulus for my birthday. It was my birthday gift to myself, and I grew up with the series. My father and I watch them all together, and I've seen all of them. And we know, if I'm talking to the Alien fans, there are some that are not good. So going into this one, I had pretty much just baseline expectations, but I understood that it was going to be a direct sequel to the original 1979 Alien. So I thought that was promising. I sit down. I know it was co-written by Fede Alvarez and directed by him, who did the Evil Dead remake in 2013. So I knew it was going to have more of a horror lean. So I'm watching the film, and it's microcosmic. It's a very small group of people in a large space, but still, confined. There's a lot of confinement, which is the original formula. Take a couple people, confine them, put this scary thing in there with them. But as I'm watching the film, I note that there are elements of the prequels that are brought in. There are elements from Prometheus and Covenant that are brought into the film. And there are even redemptive arcs from the films that didn't work, like Resurrection. I feel like the third act of this one is like a redemptive act for Alien Resurrection. There are classic story beats that you have to have in an Alien film. You have to say, get away from her, you bitch. You have to have one of the synthetics run amok. You have to have a nail-biting tense scene in a corridor. This time they do it vertically, and like the tension was great. The performances were good. The aliens looked amazing. They held off showing them till the end. I felt it to be a very respectful and meaningful entry in this series of films.
I mean, I enjoyed it. Let me just put that right out there. I enjoyed it. It is a good movie. I don't think it's superlative, but I still liked it. I still had fun watching it, and a lot of that to me was down to the production elements. The set design is off the charts. I absolutely love the way that Romulus Station is set up. I love the divided pathways of a Romulus and a Remus wing. That's a very nice meta reference there. Without spoiling anything, the nesting corridor, for lack of a better term, was a great reveal. The cinematography and the color schemes and the lighting were really just a feast for the eyes. Like I was blown away by how it was basically shot like a puzzle box. Like there was one really good scene where the camera comes down from what ends up being a horizontal corridor and then turns down a vertical one in one seamless motion. That's really good stuff. Most of the visual effects, I was pretty impressed by, except for the final adversary. And like Eric said, you have to have a synthetic run amok. You didn't have to use AI to graft Ian Holmes' face onto one of them. That was in poor taste as far as I'm concerned. Again, well, same thing with putting Anya Taylor-Joy's face on her younger version in Furiosa. It's like, let's get away from this AI crap. We just had 2 strikes over it. Stop doing it. It's like, and especially with Furiosa, it's like she grows up into Charlize Theron, so you don't need a child version that looks like Anya Taylor-Joy, because she's still not going to look like Charlize Theron at the end. So stop doing that stuff. Bad. No, don't do it. But once you get past that and you kind of accept that this is more of a formulaic, by the numbers alien film that's just trying to be good, that's when you can really appreciate it. Like, yeah, there's things I can nitpick to death. Like the fact that Kaylee Spaney is the new Ripley because she's got top billing, not for any other reason. But I really like David Johnson's performance as Andy. Like the film kind of starts out with her being, her character's name is Rain, just be as on the nose as possible. But she's got this like replicant synthetic android adoptive brother that her dad reprogrammed, and that makes him a little bit dim-witted. So you combine the two of them and their desire to go to a more sunny agrarian world. It's like Of Mice and Men in space to a certain extent. But when we have to, reprogram Andy again to get through Romulus, David Johnson, who's a relatively new actor, like doesn't have very many credits, he turns it completely 180 and becomes this detached, cold, logical, borderline malevolent force, kind of like how Ash was in the original. So I really loved his performance. Like, most of the cast I could take or leave, but he absolutely knocked it out of the park. It should be a star-making role for him. So yeah, there's things that I didn't care for in the movie, but at the same time, it's by default the best one since Aliens. So, and like Eric said, they do make an effort to right the wrongs of the previous installment. So I can't fault it too much. You look at the 80% rating that it has on Rotten Tomatoes. If you look closer at the actual reviews, a lot of them are just basically 4 out of 5 critics saying, it's all right, which, okay, that skews the results for once. It's a bit of an outlier, but I'm okay with that.
It just makes me think this means they get to make more Alien movies, and I don't know that we need that.
I mean, it's a bit of a catch-22, because you can definitely see franchise fatigue setting in with a lot of these things, but at the same time, they're the only things making money. I mean, if you look at the box office for the year, 9 of the top 10 movies of the year so far for box office are sequels, and the 10th one is Quiet Place Day One, which I guess is a prequel. So everything is franchise right now. I don't agree with it. I don't like it, but that is the business reality of it. And because of that, the studios just cling closer and tighter to every IP they have, trying to, wring blood from a stone.
That's a nice way of saying it's your fault, people. Like, you keep going to see these things. They're going to keep making them. There is no way around it.
I mean, it's a self-perpetuating circle, because we keep watching them, and then they become the only option to watch.
The movie is called Anora. It's the latest from Sean Baker. I believe it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, so it's already getting tons of critical acclaim. Basically, this movie is like it's like Pretty Woman, but the nightmare version of it. And I described in my review of it, I described the experience of the film as sort of being grabbed by the lapels and thrown through a plate glass window, only to find you're not dead, but you've hit the ground and you're banged up and bruised, but you were like only on the first floor. So you're still like really exhilarated that you're alive. You know, that was the experience of it. And it's got some great performance, very performance driven. I think that's what we're going to see a lot of in these movies that we're talking about. Is like performance driven dramas and real like indie films. This movie, the main character Annie, who's also, her full name is Anora, but she goes by Annie, played by Mikey Madison, who I saw in the new Natalie Portman streaming series on Apple TV. I think it's called Lady in the Lake, where she plays like a teenager in that. So, which was kind of weird because she's like really naked in this movie. She plays a sex worker. She dances in a strip club and occasionally moonlights as an escort. She meets this character called Ivan, played by Mark Edelstein. He's the son of like a Russian oligarch, but maybe a gangster, like maybe does some illegal stuff. We don't know. He kind of hires her to be his girlfriend for a week, and it's a wild ride of booze and drugs and parties and nightclubs, and it all sort of culminates in this trip to Las Vegas where these two young people decide to get married so that Yvonne can become a U.S. citizen. And then once they're married, she quits her job at the club. She's living with her new husband in their big mansion. And then everything goes to hell when his parents find out about the marriage. They send this guy called Toros, played by Karan Karagulian. Sorry about the names. I know I'm mispronouncing them. He's a sort of their man in New York, he's got these two guys with him, these two goons that are both very funny characters. The movie is surprisingly funny. There's a lot of humor in it, and the crowd was like really laughing, and I found myself laughing too at certain moments, mainly because of their awkwardness. There's some very kind of raw scenes, and it's very on brand for Sean Baker. He's done movies about he does movies with a lot of non-actors, Florida Project and Tangerine. But this is really kind of raw and real, and the performances are really excellent. They're very, very good, and they're very realistic. It's like this is how real people would act in this situation. It's definitely a great ensemble, but it's really Annie's story and what she goes through. And for Madison, I think this is a star-making turn. I don't know if she'll get recognized by the Academy and other people, but she should. I think it captures something that we don't really see a lot of today, and I think that's why it got all the attention. It's a real independent film, and it really did something different, and it's not about robots or car chases or there's no explosions or anything. And I thought, oh my god, you got these Russian gangster types, there's going to be a gunfight and a car chase, and none of that happens. They totally don't go with any of the genre tropes, and I think in that way it's really surprising. But I would definitely recommend it if you get a chance to see it.
Arcadian, starring the inimitable Nicolas Cage. And if Nicolas Cage is in, I'm in. So I had to watch this one. It's set in a post-apocalyptic near future. At the very beginning, you see that Cage, like as the world is falling apart, he has twin baby boys. And that, like right away, that's just heartbreaking. This man in a world that's ending having to raise two sons. But flashes forward 15 years, they've got a good thing going. They're living on a farm. They're pretty much self-sufficient. They have neighbors. They know other people are alive. And during the day, they're able to run free, do whatever they need to do. But at night, they lock themselves up tight because there are creatures out there. For most of the film, it's a very by-the-numbers, post-apocalyptic survival film. A little slow, building tension. When the creatures arrive, OMG, pure nightmare fuel. These things are some of the most terrifying creature design I've ever seen. I described it as the monsters from Attack the Block if you filtered them through the Dark Crystal. But that's only the aesthetic. The way they move, the way they attack, the way they terrorize, it is a sight to behold. It will stay with you long after you finish the film. Cage, I think, is a little underutilized in this. The real stars are the sons. One is played by Jaden Martell, who played the lead kid in the It films that Blumhouse did. And the other is played by Maxwell Jenkins, who's been picking up a lot of work in television and streaming. Really great performances out of the two of them.
It's really their movie, and it's I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and I've already started telling people you got to see this movie because these creatures, the person who came up with these has clearly never slept a night in their life.
It sounds interesting. Do we get full Cage?
No. I put money on the table and I lost it. He did not go full Cage. A very resigned performance from him, but it fits the character. He's a put upon father, raising two 15-year-old boys. Like, that's the folly of youth. That's like the time when they're at their worst. But I will say that the filmmaker who made this film did the visual effects on Everything Everywhere All at Once. So you can kind of see where that inventiveness came into making this film.
Beetlejuice 2. And I just want to refresh people's memory because the original Beetlejuice, the first Beetlejuice, happened back in 1988. It's the story of a newly deceased couple, played by Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, at the height of their collective beautifulness. I think they died in a car accident, and they are sort of doomed to haunt their country home. They are harassed by this awful family from the city that moves in, and so they try to drive them out, but they have to hire this creature Beetlejuice to get them out, and of course it backfires on them, and their whole lives change. Everything goes upside down, and now we're coming back to that, revisiting it. Bill, why don't you give us the plot of Beetlejuice?
Yes. Plot. I shouldn't say that. There is a story. It's just kind of threadbare and very by the numbers. So, now we're 35 years later. Lydia Dietz is the host of a Ghost Hunters type show, and she's dating her producer, who's a complete fraud and a manipulator. He's a discount Otho. He's played by Justin Theroux. She's kind of estranged from her daughter, Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega. And as the film is set in motion, her father, Charles, who was previously played by Jeffrey Jones, has died. Not to spoil anything, but they have a lot of fun with Charles's death. I will, given what we know now about Jeffrey Jones, obviously he wasn't going to be brought back for this. So the way they handle him is a lot of fun. I will grant that. Meanwhile, Beetlejuice has somehow created a whole thriving business out of his bioexorcism, to the point where he runs a full office full of these shrunken head zombies. His ex-wife, Dolores, played by Monica Bellucci, escapes from whatever boxes her severed, dismembered parts were in. She staples herself back together, and she's a soul-sucking witch, literally, who is now hunting for him. So he's still stalking Lydia 35 years later to try to get back to the real world. Dolores is hunting him down, trying to devour his soul, which I guess is another form of death for the dead apart from exorcism. I have in my closet somewhere an actual handbook for the recently deceased. It's just a journal that you write, and it's completely blank. So in my mind, it was written by agnostics. It's this. There's basically these two parallel stories going on, where Lydia is trying to deal with her father's death, being roped into a quickie marriage to this Rory character, and dealing with her daughter, who just hates her because something generational trauma something. While of course she's off, Jenna Ortega, she's off, just being mopey, and look, there's a cute boy. Let's derail the plot for this. It's hard to parse this movie, because you see a lot of the hallmarks of what made the original great. There are some really fun ideas, really funny depictions of death. The neither world, for lack of a better term, I know that was just used for the cartoon and not in the movies, but I stick with that. It's still very creative, but part of what made the original movie so great is that you had Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis as the straight men to counterbalance all this, and you really don't have that character this time around In fact, Adam and Barbara Maitland are literally just waved off with one line for them not being there, and it's cringeworthy how easily it's dismissed. Whereas you could take a risk with Lydia back in 1988 to basically make her, resent her stepmother, but not actively hate her, and have a good relationship with her father, but still be gothy, emo, and even suicidal because she just doesn't feel like a normal person. We don't have that with Astrid. Jenna Ortega is a fine actress, but she's terrible in this because she's given nothing to work with. She's there because they want the audience to say, "Oh, I remember her. She's in Wednesday. Let's go watch that on Netflix after we're done here." And part of it, I think, is because back in '88, Winona Ryder was just starting out, and she was 16 when this movie came out. She was an actual teenager. So you could actually buy her as any random girl you would meet on the street. You had this girl in your school, maybe exaggerated, but you knew someone like her. Whereas Astrid is, Jenna Ortega is going to be 22 in a couple of weeks. And we've watched her on TV and film for more than a decade. We've watched her literally grow up into an adult. So we can't really buy her as a teenager, even though it's not that big of an age difference. We really can't buy it. You see a real teenager in Winona Ryder in 1988, and you see an actress pretending to be a teenager with Jenna Ortega. And again, there's nothing really to explain her mopiness other than rebelling teenager trope. Everything is my parents' fault. I'm perfect. I have no flaws. The whole movie is about everybody coming to accept me rather than me taking a journey. And that's just not what this film, this series now, I guess, and Tim Burton is supposed to be about. It's like the reason we love Beetlejuice so much, the reason it's a timeless classic is because it was completely unexpected. You had no idea what was going to happen from one scene to the next. The Deo scene is a timeless comedy miracle. It is one of the greatest scenes in cinema history because you had no idea it was coming. The only clue you got was the fact that there's other Harry Belafonte tracks playing in the background in a few scenes. And then, Alec Baldwin says, "Hey, I've got a plan." He doesn't tell you what the plan is. It just happens. Here, the film opens with a kind of a recreation of the overhead drone shots of the miniatures. Only now it's like enhanced by storm effects because more technology. And they're playing MacArthur Park. Well, I already know what song they're going to use to try to one up the Deo scene. Is like, and that's the core problem here. The biggest sin this movie commits is that it is entirely predictable. Nearly every story and character beat I could pin down within 5 minutes. And that just shouldn't happen. Part of the conflict between Astrid and Lydia is that, her ex-husband / Astrid's father is dead, and Lydia can't see her ghost. The ghost never comes to visit or whatever, so she thinks Lydia's a fraud. Well, it's like, no, your own rules establish this. Why could Lydia see Adam and Barbara? It's right there in the handbook. Living people often ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual. Astrid is almost aggressively ordinary. She's a cardboard cutout made from studio notes. From the moment she, meets up with Arthur Conti as Jeremy, oh, look, cute boy, every single place this is going to go. Now, and it's just so frustrating, but I will say this. I still enjoyed myself on a base level. Catherine O'Hara steals every goddamn scene she's in. She is just a marvel and keeps proving why she's one of the greatest comedic forces of the last, 4 decades. Willem Dafoe has a really fun minor role as this dead actor who becomes a paranormal detective in the afterlife. Just like with Cage playing Longlegs, Willem Dafoe in this role it's just pure distilled Dafoe. Michael Keaton absolutely thrives in every second. Like it really is as if there was no time between the movies. Like, Beetlejuice is still Beetlejuice to his core. And his manic energy is what sells a lot of the great moments. There are some jokes that don't work, like there's a Soul Train, which just makes you wonder, well, what did they do before the show? And a lot of the more ribald humor is taken out because a 1988 PG is way harsher than a 2024 PG-13 movie, evidenced by the fact that this is just one of those minor things that irks me. I'm not gonna swear, but there's a moment where Michael Keaton drops an F-bomb. It's a great moment. And then a few scenes later, he drops another one, but because you only get one in a PG-13 movie, they bleeped the second one. I was like, you're playing it too safe. If this is the line to say what was once PG is now R, take the damn R, Tim.
My favorite Tim Burton is early Tim Burton. I thought he made some really great work. When you look at Ed Wood, Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice, those are, to me, the sort of the quintessential core drives of Tim Burton movies. And I'll definitely see this movie just because I'm curious and I'm still in love with Winona Ryder for 30 years. But yeah, again, my same question. Do we need this film?
This one I can decidedly say no, especially because there are so many avenues where Tim Burton of 30 years ago would have gone down them in a heartbeat. The fact that Lydia has, quote unquote, sold out and got famous hosting this ghost hunter show. In the 80s and early 90s, Tim Burton would have made an entire movie out of how she became a ghost hunter, whether she's faking it, whether the whole thing is BS, which it is, and all that fun stuff. He would have had a field day with that. There's an early scene where Delia, when she learns of Charles's death, has to cancel an art installation that she was doing, and the collaborator she was working with gets really ticked off, and he storms out of the gallery and immediately falls down a manhole to his death. It's a funny scene. And then he shows up in the waiting room having no idea what to do because there's a language barrier. He only speaks French. I was like, that should have been a running gag throughout the entire movie. It's abandoned after 5 minutes. There's this Danny DeVito has a cameo as a janitor in the afterlife, and he's framed in the first of his two scenes as if it's this big reveal, oh my god, we're going to see somebody important. It's Danny DeVito. He's shot from the back. We know what Danny DeVito looks like. His physical appearance has not changed in 50 years. Just the amount of hair on his head. It's even from the back, we know exactly who it is. So why are you treating this as if it's this huge moment? Especially when you're just going to unceremoniously get rid of him in the next scene. So it's like Tim Burton had a really good idea for where he wanted to go with this, and rather than fight the powers that be, he was just whatever, do what you want, so I can get a hit for once. Because the last movie he did was the god-awful Dumbo remake. Rotten Tomatoes pointed this out yesterday because it crept over the line 75% to get certified fresh. It's at 76 as we're recording this. And that's his first certified fresh film since Frankenweenie. Big Eyes got close. It got to 72. And I love Big Eyes. That to me was his last great movie. And I think it's underappreciated. But to go 12 years without any real critical success, I think he's just I want to see what I can do with these characters again, but I'm willing to compromise whatever it takes to basically get it to a point of success. And it won the weekend box office. It'll probably win another one, but it feels oddly soulless. And for this universe in particular, that feels like a sin. But again, it's still good enough. You could still sit there, eat your popcorn out of your bob-shaped bucket and enjoy yourself. But it's a good, competent film. It's a terrible follow-up to Beetlejuice.
We're gonna put that on the poster. It's good enough.
Deadpool and Wolverine presenting the last movie anyone will care about in the MCU. We finally get Deadpool 3. We finally get the team up of him and Wolverine that we've always wanted. And it's just as ultra-violent, irreverent, fourth wall breaky as ever. You get tons of cameos, but ones that you would never expect. And that's where the fun is. It's like Ryan Reynolds is playing with the Marvel formula in a way that both satisfies Kevin Feige and his ilk, but also pokes as much fun at them as they can get away with. You know, there are entire swaths of time devoted in this film to how Disney destroyed Fox and how the multiverse is BS, and you're just completely bungling the most valuable film property in history. Again, up until the line where Feige would intervene and put a stop to it. So, you know, the story, you know, who even cares? You know, Deadpool's in a different timeline. His timeline is about to, you know, disintegrate in like 2,000 years because the Wolverine that died at the end of Logan was like their anchor being, which makes no sense whatsoever, which is kind of the point. I mean, hell, you have Logan, which was made in 2014, but set in 2029, having a dead and decomposed Logan in 2018, in 2024, 5 years before it even happens. Like, you know, Deadpool made the joke in the first movie about how these timelines are so confusing. He intentionally makes it even more so, all to set up an opening sequence where he uses Wolverine's skeleton to murder a bunch of fools to the tune of bye, bye, bye. It's like, this is what fans have been waiting for since Endgame, really. You had your victory lap to get all self-serious and bring everything together. And since then, all we've really wanted is fun. This is a palate cleanser. It's catharsis. And it's done in a way where we can all kind of just get off the train now. Like, we have our ability to just laugh at this parade of absurdity with a super adorable ugly dog with its tongue hanging out its mouth, and a Blake Lively version of Deadpool that will make nerds swoon for years to come. And we get Wolverine in the yellow spandex that we always wanted. He even puts on the cowl. It was like, finally, just give us something to enjoy on a base level. If we want to think deeper into it, we can. If we don't, we don't have to. And also, we don't have homework. We don't have to watch 20 Disney Plus shows to know what the hell's going on. This is what you were supposed to do, Feige. Get back to doing it, or get off the proverbial pot.
Agree totally.
One of the things that we talked about, so Cameron Kitten and I did a summer preview episode. It seemed to me that they were looking at this film to be the panacea that was supposed to fix everything. I don't know if one movie can do that. I don't know if this movie in particular could do that. Does it do it?
I'll take that one. The beauty of Deadpool and Wolverine is that, no, it does not do that at all. It has the requisite Marvel post-credit scene, and that scene they use to set up absolutely nothing. This film is meant to celebrate what has come before, give ideas as to what can come after in terms of execution, not story, not, you know, let's lay the groundwork for this obscure character to come out of, you know, Secret Wars number 301. No, it's fun. It's what we've been asking for. It's a visual delight, an oral delight, cameo explosions. It's a great movie. I took my wife to see this movie. She does not like movies. She's not a movie person, but I was like, hey, I'm going with 7 of my closest friends. Do you want to go? She's like, yeah, sure. She went. She watched it. She laughed at a lot of the jokes. As we were leaving, she said to me, "Hey, are the other movies like that? Are Deadpool 1 and 2 like that, where like he's all quippy and funny?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Maybe I'll watch those." That's what this movie is. It's not the Marvel antidote. It's a good movie.
All right, so I did get an opportunity to see The Death Tour, and it's a very well-made documentary. Very much cinema verite style for the most part. There are a couple of sit-down interviews, but many of the interviews are captured on the fly. The camera is a bystander on the tour, and we're riding along with these wrestlers and seeing what they go through. It's not very glamorous, even though they are performers. We see these wrestlers as real people. We see them in and out of the ring, in and out of character. We also see the communities that the tour goes through, and we get a sense of what the people are like and what the environment's like. As the directors mentioned in the interview, the title The Death Tour is a nickname given to the tour because it's so grueling and difficult, but here it has a double meaning. There are several suicides that happen in the various communities that they travel through, one of which happens the day before they arrive, and this company of wrestlers is faced with these tragedies, and they have to decide how they're going to interact with the communities. For Sonia Ballantyne, it's a very personal documentary. She grew up in this world, largely made up of indigenous people in northern Manitoba. These filmmakers had to decide to what degree they were going to show these tragedies. Are they going to go to funerals, etc.? And I'm sure there were some tough conversations, but I think they made all the right decisions. They call attention to what's happening without sensationalizing it, and that's commendable. It's a very honest film, and it pulls no punches. It's beautifully shot with some stunning cinematography from Van Royko. And despite the subject matter being quite dark at times, it's a very hopeful and inspirational film. The stories of these wrestlers are inspiring, and we do feel a great deal for them. You don't have to be interested in wrestling to appreciate this film. You don't have to be a football fan to like Hard Knocks. You don't have to be a Chicago Bulls fan to appreciate a series like The Last Dance. You just have to appreciate some great storytelling. Now, I would say the biggest question for a film like this is, will it get seen? Hopefully, it'll get distribution. I would say I highly recommend it if you can catch it at a film festival. Hopefully, it'll be on a streaming service or in a theater near you in the near future.
This film is Democracy Noir, directed by Connie Field. And basically, it concerns three women in Hungary. One of them is Timea Szabo, who is a member of the parliament. Then you have Babette, who is one of the few remaining independent journalists in Hungary. And then you have a nurse who grew up on a farm. Her name's Nico. So these are three women of varying levels of education, blue collar to white collar to government. And the film is basically about their opposition to self-proclaimed dictator Viktor Orban. You've probably heard his name a lot in the news, especially the former president's affections for him. While Orban was first elected in 2010 as prime minister as something of a populist change candidate, sound familiar? He soon revealed himself to be horribly corrupt. He has basically tried to remake the entire country in his image. The voting districts are gerrymandered all to hell. He declared basically by fiat that Hungary was now a Christian nation, even though less than 40% of the population is even religious, much less identifying as Christian. He has funneled European Union funds to his cronies and his family. He has become personally quite wealthy off of his positioning in power for the last 12 years, 14 actually, to the point where his humble country manor now has a giant soccer stadium right next to it. The film is really about, again, the resistance. How do these women of different ages and different walks find their own way to oppose and maintain a truly democratic society in their homeland, especially because Orban gets it from all sides. I mean, he is not well liked. The European Union hates him. And yet he keeps winning in landslides. Part of that is because of the gerrymandering he's done to the parliament. Part of it is because he tried to rewrite the Constitution to basically give himself all the power. His most recent re-election in 2022, there were observers from international bodies to basically say is like, is this a free and fair election? And the answer is no. This is a man who basically bought out almost all of the independent media and turned it into state TV to the point where like they even show you, 3 separate networks that are reading the same copy as far as their propaganda pieces. So you see Timmy Ashoba's, her work within Parliament to try to at least keep some guardrails in place. You see Babette, who, again, is an independent journalist, not only deal with the barrage of propaganda and bull coming at her, but also try to maintain her family, and because she's a lesbian, and right now her family is not legally recognized. And then you have Nico, who is an artist and a farmer and a nurse, and she highlights the problems with the healthcare system where essentially if you go to a public hospital in Hungary, because they do have, national healthcare like every civilized country but ours, if you go to a public hospital, you essentially have to sign NDAs and agree to surveillance. So at least if you work in those hospitals, sometimes even if you're a patient. So there are people who essentially opt out for private insurance because they want, God forbid, some security and privacy. So we see Nico's journey basically trying to juggle the reality of what her country has become as she's come of age, but also deal with the previous generation. Like, there's a lot of conversation she has with her mother, who sadly passed away earlier this year, where the mother demonstrates the kind of problem with populism and any kind of authoritarian government. All she cares about is if there's food on the table. She doesn't care about things like redistricting, tax code, civil rights. Can she get bread and milk and eggs from the grocery store? So, sure, Viktor Orban is demonizing Syrian refugees and, parroting Nazi language about immigrants. But doesn't bother her. She lives out in the country and she can feed her family. That's all that matters to her. So he's doing a good job. And it's dispiriting because, the last election, which again, observers basically declared was not free and fair, Orban's party got less than 50% of the parliamentary vote. And yet they now make up 2/3 of the parliament. Because that's how rigged the game is. The film itself, basically, from a political angle, is about all these opposition parties coming together to form a united front, because essentially, to put it in more of American terms, Orban is the Republican Party, the Democratic Party doesn't exist, and all these other minor parties are the independents, the Greens, the Libertarians, and they all make up a majority of the Hungarian population if they come together. And the question is it too late to do so once Orban seized all the controls of power, all the levers of power? Timmy, I mean, she's in a very safe district in Budapest for her parliamentary seat, and yet at the last election, they put out a huge smear campaign against her, using the media to accuse her of smuggling drugs and working as a prostitute and all these other things to get her out of office. Thankfully, it didn't work, but it was the closest of victory of her career. Like, they got within 10 points, which shouldn't have even been possible given where she lives. So it kind of serves as a microcosm for all the world politics where democracy is kind of backsliding into authoritarianism. We saw it with Brexit. We see it in our country, with the MAGA movement. We saw it in Argentina. We saw it in Brazil. Like, for some reason, 90 years after World War II, this kind of fascism is back on the rise. So again, just like with Zorowski v. Texas that we discussed on the previous episode, this is a film about showing it from the people who are actually affected by it, rather than it just being a lecture or an educational tool. And I think that's the key here. Is like when you make these very heavy themes reduced down to the actual human element of people who are being damaged, victimized, or just any adverse effect from it, that makes it feel more real and makes it more of a call to action.
Don't You Let Me Go from Uruguay. And it's again, adult best friends.
We talked about this on the preview episode,
yes,
I think.
Because I read the
It was
log
a really
line.
interesting premise.
Yeah, and I was like, that's going to be good. And so I watched the film, and the film is really beautiful in that, she's the main character, Adela, is at this wake for her friend Elena, who has passed away. And the wake is attended by generations of people. There's children running around who don't really know what's happening. There's old people who have been to too many of these. And there's a lot of her contemporaries who are adults. And they keep talking about her in the past tense in a way that doesn't feel natural. So Adela leaves, and a bus pulls up right outside her car that's going to a destination that she once went to with Elena. And so she boards the bus, and sure enough, it takes her back in time. She gets to a beach house that they spend a weekend in, and there's Elena. And so they spend the weekend together. And it's clear as the film moves forward that it's not time travel, it's not revisionist history, it's memory. You can see that whenever she wants to say...
So she's going back in her own memories.
In her memories,
Oh,
yeah. So when it's like, and then we went to the market, cut to the market. Like, it uses filmmaking terminology within the way that we access our own memories. And we can stay in those for as long as we want, or we can go through the painful process of moving forward. And that's what I really found the film to be about. It ends with this fantastical element about trapping moments in time and creating your own Arrested Development, or you can choose to move through grief in a more adult and meaningful way.
It's like kind of Eternal Sunshine vibes?
Less fantastical, actually.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of groundedness to it.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good.
Furiosa. It's a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, which is one of my favorite films of all time. Certainly one of my favorite films of this century. Why don't you give us a little plot synopsis of Furiosa?
Furiosa, I mean, it's right there in the title. Like, this is the saga of how the surprise breakthrough badass played by Charlize Theron in Fury Road became who she was. This truly is an origin story, starting with her as a child, growing up in one of the few, what do they call it? A place of
a place of abundance.
Yeah. All the way up until she, falls in with the Citadel and Immortan Joe, how she loses her arm, how she learns to drive the Fury Road. It is a traditional origin story. It's not as bombastic as Fury Road, and there's a little bit too much reliance on digital effects, whereas Fury Road was mostly done with a strong balance and even favoritism toward practical. But I still thoroughly enjoyed it, especially Chris Hemsworth as Dementis. Oh my God, he was a lot of fun. You see this guy play Thor for over a decade. You're used to seeing him play, heroes and heartthrobs. So to see him be this vainglorious, insane, self-described messianic figure is just a delight. Just to see him go so far against type and lean into every second of it, I just loved.
He was impressive. I thought performances all the way around were really good. I don't have anything against Anya Taylor-Joy, but I just don't think she's Charlize Theron. Like, Charlize Theron in Fury Road is special, and I don't know that this performance kind of matches up to that performance. And of course, it's George Miller. It's like a really well-made movie. The part that got me were the action scenes. When the action kicks in, when she's like underneath that truck, even as a kid, when they go to the bullet farm and Gastown, the paragliders and all. I mean, like, George Miller's really taking this to a new level. And, he's like a grandpa. He's like 75 years old. And he was a doctor. He was like a for real, like, medical doctor. before he even became a director. Like, this guy has had multiple lives, but I don't know. I think you're kind of tempting fate when you do a prequel to something like this. And my question is, did we need this movie?
Hard to say, though, since you mentioned that he was a doctor, now I'm kind of fantasizing about a world where he and Ken Jeong do a show called Diagnosing Movies. Because they're both former medical professionals. I do love Anya Taylor-Joy. She's one of my favorite actresses. And she's a goddess who walks this earth. I would swim through sulfuric acid for one date with her. I don't care.
What struck me was I'm just now able to sort of put it into words, is I felt like we were watching Anya Taylor-Joy cosplay Furiosa, like especially at the end.
Yes and no. I mean, it wasn't needed from the pure standpoint of, unless we're going to continue doing sequels with this character, we really don't need to know her backstory. We just know that she is awesome, and that's good enough. But I'll give Miller credit. He wrote a screenplay's worth of backstory for the character when he was pitching it to Charlize Theron over a decade ago. So the material was already there. So given the audience response to the character, given how long this was in development held, because he was insisting that we tell the story right, I'm certainly more than okay with what we got. Because this was more of a triumph of the auteur over the studio. The fact that this had to get shopped around and so many different hands had their fingers in the proverbial soup. It's like, no, he wrote this story. He created this character. He created a whole universe around her so that if she became a fan favorite, which she did, then he can pay that off. So this wasn't something hastily thrown together as a cash grab. I mean, Fury Road was 10 years ago. So in that respect, was it needed? No. Is it appreciated? Yes.
I don't know. I thought it was not bad. I felt like it was a little bit long, and at one point I thought we were going to see this child grow up in like real time. I know people just wanted more of this story. I don't know where we go from here with Mad Max, or if we go anywhere at all. Like, do we want to see another Tom Hardy Mad Max movie with whatever accent he's decided to do, and grunting? Are we? Because it wouldn't make sense for Charlize Theron, that character, to be in a next Mad Max. So, like, if we didn't do this, what will we do? I had the chance to see Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive, and I must say, we've all heard of Gloria Gaynor, and we all know the big hit song, I Will Survive. We've all heard it at one time or another. It was a disco anthem. It's been around for nearly 50 years. But the documentary really takes a close look at the artist and her struggles with health, her career, and we follow her journey to record this new gospel album, which took her years to complete. The film started before COVID, and she started that journey, and then she had a number of challenges along the way. I don't want to spoil the film. It's filmed in a very cinema verite style. Much of it is captured on the fly with just a couple of sit-down interview pieces. It's mainly from Gaynor's point of view, although they do talk to a couple of other people about her. But I think there are definitely some surprises for people who may be fans of her music but don't know much about her life. And, I could say I'm not a huge disco fan. I'm also not a huge gospel fan, but there's something about her. She's magnetic. She's got a great personality. She's got this very giving way about her. And, the voice is still there. She still sounds amazing. And I think there's a lot in the film people can relate to. It's a film about reinvention, survival, struggle, the will to persevere. So if you can relate to any of that, I definitely would recommend it.
This is the BTRP Media Network.